Thank you for reading that, Megan. It was quite a long reading, but she said that she'd do the reading if there wasn't too many big words. There's maybe just too many words, but not so much big ones. So today I'd like to look at this miracle, not just as the great display of power that it was, but also as a bit of a picture of what it means to be a dead man and how dead people come back to life. So in John's Gospel, there's only 7 signs of Jesus that are recorded. But in John 20, we read that Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you may have life in his name. So it suggests that there's obviously a lot of other miracles that have happened, but they didn't put them ones down. They just put these ones down, and the ones that they put down, they're not just some random nice stories, not even necessarily the most impressive ones, but there's perhaps a bit of a deeper meaning to them, and that if we can read them and understand them, we will hopefully get a more full understanding of Jesus and have life through him. So in this account, Lazarus, he has a problem. It's a very simple problem, it's a very straightforward problem, very obvious problem, but unfortunately for him it's a very big problem. He was dead. But because he was dead, it was the only problem that he had, but because of this, nothing else about him was right. He might have been a very good-looking man, perhaps. He might have, might have been very well dressed. He might have worked very hard. He might have been a great man around the house. Might have had lots of money. But whatever, it doesn't matter when you're dead, because being dead, it cancels everything that's right about you out. And lots of people around us are dead, not physically but spiritually. We walk past them on the streets. Maybe we see them in the shops. We go to work with them. They're perhaps in our families or they're running our government. But they're dead people. Obviously, physically, their hearts are still beating, but there's more than one kind of life. As we read in 1 Timothy 5, verse 6, it says, "The widow who lives for pleasure is dead even while she lives." I'll take John 10:10, as Pete's already mentioned this morning. He says in there that I have come that they may have life. So obviously Jesus is speaking to people that are listening by the fact that are alive by the fact that they're listening, but the clear implication is that they're dead spiritually, and that's what the gospel is all about. It's about the fact that Jesus came that we could be alive, to use the words of Jesus, to be born again and receive new and full life. So if you sort of carry on the metaphor in this respect, our physical bodies have become the tombs of our spiritual death. We walk around in these physical bodies, but they're holding our dead spirits, really. So, like I said at the start, this passage, it demonstrates God's power, and it would have been great for the people there to witness, but hopefully we can learn some lessons about how to become spiritually alive. And as it was with Lazarus, so can be true for us. He was dead, and that was his only problem. It was a big problem. But if we're spiritually dead, that's also our only problem, really. Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter. You might be a religious person, but you could still be spiritually dead. So, yeah, that's the only thing that you need to get right, really, is being spiritually alive. So, how do spiritually dead people become alive? Well, it's by letting Jesus in, but we'll look into that, into the story and see what we can learn. So, firstly, there are a few realities of being dead, some symptoms, you might say, and I hope doctors have slightly more advanced diagnostic tests, but even a layperson can see these things. So, firstly, dead people don't eat anything. They don't have an appetite. No one would have thought, Lazarus, who's been in that tomb for 4 days, he's probably hungry. Should we take him a sandwich? It's obvious that no one's done that. He wouldn't have an appetite. But spiritually dead people are like that too. They don't have an appetite for the things of God. They have no desire for coming to church. Well, they might have a desire for church, I suppose, but they have no desire to actually get to know God. But they might actually have a desire for church, oddly. They might like to come and listen to the music and enjoy a brew afterwards and speak to some people, but an actual appetite for getting to know God, they won't have that. Secondly, dead people, they don't have any curiosity. Lazarus' curiosity would have died with him. No one's been to tell him the football score or the price of grain or what the fat lamb price is that week. He's not interested. And so it's with spiritually dead people. They're not interested in things of God. There's people, well, we see them walk past here, they're not interested in coming into church, not interested in learning about God or on a Sunday or in their own time. So yeah, that's the reality of being spiritually dead. And if we pick the story up in verse 21, it says, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, notice how Martha, she's speaking in the past tense. It's if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And then Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. And then the next little bit, just further down, she says, verse 24, I think it is, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. So that's flipped there. She's now looking to the future tense. It's will rise again at the last day. And how often do we do this? Maybe we look to the things of the past and say that God's been really good in the past, or how he's worked. We look at stories in the Bible and think he was really good back then. Or maybe we look to the future, the promises of God, and we say, when this happens, we'll be better off. Or God said that he'll do this. That'll be a great moment when that promise comes true. But in verse 25, Jesus, he says, I am. I am the resurrection and the life. See, what tense is Jesus talking in? He's in the present tense. He's where she is now. It's not I was his life or I will be his resurrection. This is the God who works in the present tense, the great I am, the one who meets you where you are. It might be too late for you, but it's never too late for God. He's eternally present tense. And because of this, he is the answer to every need of the human heart. It's Jesus. He's the great I am. It's not something he has done, something he will do. It's what he is now. And that's why you get Jesus when you become a Christian, because he's what you need right now. To those who are lost, he says, I am the way. To those who are confused, he says, I am the truth. To those who are in darkness, he says, I am the light. To those who feel on the outside, he says, I am the door. To those who are hungry, he says, I am the bread. To those who are in need of direction, he says, I am the good shepherd. And to those who are in need, and to those who are dead, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. You don't need to look to the past, you don't need to look on, you just need to look to Jesus and trust him in the present. So, what does it mean for a dead man to come alive? Well, Jesus, he asks a question in verse 26 to Martha. So he's just said, I'll read from verse 25 again. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And this is his question, do you believe this? So, Martha, she'd spent quite a bit of time around Jesus. They'd probably discussed, do you believe that he's the Messiah? It would have been a hot topic of conversation at the time, probably. And her response is, well, so she probably decided that she did believe that. But it's a personal question, isn't it? We have to become involved. We have to say yes to Jesus. And to say, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ that came into the world. But that's obviously very good and important, but we'll see a little bit later, there's something else that has to happen. So if we jump down to verse 39, Jesus is saying to Martha that, well, I'll read verse 39. That's where Jesus asked them to take away the stone. So Jesus is saying to Martha, do you believe? And she said yes. But then he's asking her to act on the assumption that what she believes is true. To take away the stone. I want you to do something about what you believe. I want you to prove that you believe it to me, basically. And at this point, she believes that what she believes, she discovers that what she believes is only theory. Because in the second part of verse 39, she says, "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odour, for he has been there 4 days." Basically she's saying, Jesus, do you not understand? He's been in that tomb for a long time, his body's rotting, it'll stink in there, you don't really want to look in there, do you? And that might be your response too. You might say, I realise that I'm spiritually dead, and this body that I live in is the tomb of my spiritual death, but you don't really want to look in here, do you, Jesus? You don't know what I think, you don't know what I've done in the past, you don't want to look in there, do you? It stinks, it's rotten. But then Jesus says in verse 40, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God?" So you need to stop thinking in merely human terms. Of course, humanly speaking, she would have been right. Lazarus would have started to smell, his body would have been breaking down. But if she puts her belief in Jesus, she can start to see past this, and she hands the responsibility over to Jesus. See, believing it's placing your dependence in something else. So if I believe in my car, which I do, I can get in that car after work and ring home and say, I'll be home in 20 minutes, because I genuinely believe that my car can do that. I entrust myself to my car. But if I see another car in a garage somewhere and I think, yeah, it's a really nice looking car, but I'd never get into it, I don't fully believe in it. And that's what Martha's doing, really. She's saying, yeah, Jesus looks good, which is important, but to effect any change, she has to move the stone. She has to get into the car, as it were. So you have to fully believe and let him intervene to let something happen. Otherwise, you'll be held back by the physical limitations of what is humanly possible. So in verse 41, they take away the stone. And that's an act of obedience, really. But that act of obedience, it precedes the act of God. And that's often the case in the Bible. God will ask someone to do something, and they have to be obedient before God steps in. But to remove that stone, it would have taken courage, and it might be the same for us as well. Like I said before, you might have said that there's a lot of, whatever's inside you stinks, and you don't want to reveal it to God. So it might not be easy for you to reveal that and to open that up. Open up them areas of your life that you've kept dark for a long time. But you've got to take the courage and remove the stone, because when you do that, that's when God can do his best work, his life-bringing work. And then there's the release of a living man. So from verse 43, Jesus says, when they had done this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." See, Jesus speaks life to Lazarus here, because when he called that, Lazarus was still dead, really. He couldn't come out. But the very command of Jesus was the enabling to do it. The command speaks life. Because he who called you is faithful and will help you until completion, as we read in 1 Thessalonians. Because humanly speaking, when he started shouting that, Lazarus was still dead. But if we sort of shift the onus onto Lazarus a bit now, he still had something to do when he heard that command. He didn't have to come out. He could have stayed in the tomb. He could have reacted against the command and stayed there. And this is true for us as well. When we hear the calling of the Spirit, we have to make a choice. Do we sort of grieve him and ignore him and quench what he's calling us to do? Close him down, as it were, or do we respond like Lazarus and actually do what he's asking us to? Anyway, Lazarus obviously did respond. It says in verse 44 that the dead man came out. See, this was a combination of believing, acting, and obeying. That's what brought the dead man out the tomb. See, Lazarus has in the words of Jesus, he's been born again. And we can have that same life if we come alive spiritually, we can have a spiritual resurrection, which is shown by a spiritual appetite and spiritual life. But one final comment on the release of a living man says in verse 44, the dead man came out, his hands and feet were wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth round his face. See, these were like tightly wrapped strips of linen that they would wrap the dead bodies in before they put them in the grave. They were grave clothes that belonged to the old life. And see, it says his hands were tied, so that meant he couldn't do anything. His feet were tied, so he couldn't go anywhere. And he had one around his face as well, so he couldn't see anything. See, he was alive, but he was still very much restricted. So Jesus said to release him. I think in one translation it says to loose him from the grave clothes. He had to strip off all the bindings of the old life, all the stuff that belonged to the tomb. And perhaps that's some of us this morning. We might be alive, we've been saved by Jesus or whatever, but we sort of just stumble around in like a bit of a spiritual daze. We're still clinging on to some things of the past. You need to strip off them grave clothes and replace them with the clothing of Jesus. It's a deep, meaningful relationship with Jesus, and I think that's probably another sermon all in itself. It's probably a harder sermon to make, that one. But if you become a Christian, there's got to be constantly things changing in your life as you sort of grow more like Jesus. But once you've got this spiritual life, one day you will still be physically dead, but you'll never be spiritually dead. But to get the most out of the Christian life, you need to strip off those grave clothes. And then just one point from verse 53, it says, so from that day on they plotted to take his life. So that was the Pharisees plotting to take Jesus' life. So do you see what it cost Jesus to give Lazarus his life? From that, basically Jesus, he signed his own death warrant, bringing Lazarus back to life. And that's what it cost Jesus to save Lazarus. It cost him his life. And it's the same for us with our spiritual life too. It cost Jesus his life upon the old rugged cross. So I'll just pray now, and then we'll have a final song.